Welcome to another insightful Legal Tech Talks in conjunction with Net Documents. My name is Frances Anderson, CEO of Net Law Media, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today where we're going to be discussing AI in law, leading the charge, changing the culture. Now, with the excitement and possibilities of AI growing astronomically in various jurisdictions and across different societies, how can firms look beyond the veil to explore how agentic AI and behavioural science can drive meaningful transformation and change? So today we've got four special guests with us today where we are going to be discussing this and more. And leading today's session, we have Chris Bull, who will be chairing, and should time allow, he'll be bringing you into the debate should you have questions nearer to the end. So as many of as you know who follow our sessions, this session is live. And what that means is if you'd like to ask a question, put your hand up or put a comment in the chat function, or put your Q&A at the bottom, and then we will obviously bring that question in. Now, moving forwards, our chair is, as I said, Chris Bull. He's a management consultant, retained advisor, thought leader, and speaker focused on the legal sector. Throughout his career, he has constantly been a pioneer of alternative business models and transformation in the sector. His roles include COO and chief executive at mold-breaking law firms such as Osborne Clarke. He's been a COO for Europe and the Americas at alternative legal service provider, Integron, and much, much more. So welcome, Chris, and thank you all for joining us today. And I'm delighted now to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Francis. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have people here for what is a really, really important topic. We're also really privileged to have a fantastic panel with a load of stuff to talk about. Sadly, we've only got an hour, so we'll try and pick the best bits out over the next hour. But everybody here could talk for very much longer. Really good news is you don't have to listen to me very much because I'm just asking the questions. So that's my job really. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to let the panel sort of introduce themselves a bit more. I'm just going to tell you who we've got, in case you haven't already clocked that. So we have Lucia Elizalde Bulanti, and Lucia is at Deckert with a fantastic job title, which she'll tell us a bit about. Lucia is the Director of Behavioural Innovation. We got James Grice. James is the Head of Innovation and AI at Lawfront. Some of you will know about Lawfront. I'll be talking about Lawfront a lot. Private equity backed legal business, which is rapidly pulling in quite a lot of UK mid-market firms. We'll hear a bit more about Lawfront and how it fits into the world of AI from James. And we've also got Michael Owen Hill. Michael is the Director of Product Marketing at Net Documents. So a lot of experience Michael's got in the legal technology sector, and obviously Net Documents a huge player in that world. So fantastic and very varied range of speakers. We've had great fun prepping for this, and hopefully you'll be able to see that, and we'll relay some of that to you. So what I'm going to do to kick off with, just like each one of you, to introduce yourselves, say something about your roles, because your roles are great, and not everybody will understand exactly where your role fits and your organizations, and just maybe give us an idea where AI fits into your life and your role. Don't need to go into much detail about that, but just kind of explain. So Lucia, I'll start with you, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to join today's webinar. So I'm a lawyer by trade. I practiced for over 20 years as a litigator in international and regional law firms in different countries in Latin America and in the UK. And for 5 years, I worked on the other side of the fence as general counsel of a Latin American multilateral financial organization. A few years ago, after practicing many years as a lawyer, it occurred to me that it was a good idea to leverage my expertise as a lawyer on both sides of the fence, as client and as a service provider, to promote much needed change in law firms. So I stopped practicing law and become a full-time innovation leader at Deckert. Today, as you mentioned, Chris, I'm the director of behavioral innovation at Deckard, and I study behavioral science. Hoping to become a behavioral scientist very soon. So my main area of work and study and research is how can we affect organizational change through changes in people's behaviors, one person at a time. Behaviors are observable and tangible actions we would like people to take. And AI is no exception. So if we want people to embrace AI, we need to take a look at the behaviors that people have around AI, what is preventing them from embracing AI, and how can we nudge them in the right direction. So in the end, we can properly and proudly talk about innovation in law firms if most of our people exhibit behaviors that are conducive to growth and change. And AI is the hot topic these days, so it's a big area of work for me. Thank you.
Lucia, how unusual is your job in law firms, as far as you know? Are there other people with a similar role title?
Not that I have heard. I mean, I haven't heard any other person with my job title, but if there's someone with a similar job title in this webinar, please feel free to reach out. I would love to be in touch. But so far,
please write in, folks, if you know somebody else with the same job title. Lucia's feeling very lonely. Brilliant. Right, we're going to hear a lot more from Lucia in just a minute. James, do you want to do a bit of an intro to you?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Chris. And yeah, hello, everybody. So if you don't know me, I'm James Grice. And as Chris said, I'm currently the head of innovation and AI at Lawfront. I've actually been in technology and transformation for nearly 2 decades, which is incredibly scary and makes me feel very old. And over half of that time has been in the legal sector. Prior to joining Lawfront at the end of last year, I spent a decade with Evershed Sutherland in a variety of technology and transformation roles. Like Lucia, I held an unusual job title at the end of my time with Evershed. Before leaving, I was the head of legal service design, which often took some explaining when I was meeting people at events and conferences. But what it basically meant was that I was heavily involved in client-facing initiatives, trying to use techniques like design thinking to solve problems for clients that perhaps traditionally it's been seen to be unsolvable. So trying to use human-centered design, collaborative teams, and sort of, I guess, diverse collaborative teams to solve these issues. As it is now, as you mentioned, I'm head of innovation and AI. I stress the "and" because not everything I do necessarily needs to contain AI, although it is so common now in what we're doing. I've been with Lawfront since December last year. Lawfront Group, if you don't know about it, is a private equity-backed law firm. We just announced our 6th acquisition today, which is very exciting. And it's very, very fast moving. And of course, AI will be a huge part, we hope, in delivering success for Lawfront as we continue to move forward and grow in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Yes, I hoped you were going to mention the fact that you were in the news again today with another acquisition. I can't get through a day without somebody asking me about Lawfront at the moment, which is interesting. But I don't know. How do you feel, James? Do you still feel a lot of the legal market doesn't know Lawfront, doesn't know what it's about?
I think it's dramatically changed this year, just in the last few months. I will say when I first accepted the role, kind of late summer last year, and started to talk to people about what was next for me, a lot of people assumed Lawfront was some sort of tech vendor, and I had to explain to them that it was a law firm. But I think increasingly, as you say, we've had some positive press over the last few months with the most recent acquisitions. We've done 2 this year. Which is getting us ever closer to our target of being a top 10 regional law firm. So I think it's a brand that is gaining recognition, but I'm still having to explain it to the odd person or clarify that it is in fact a law firm, not a tech company.
Brilliant. Well clarified. Excellent. Michael, over to you. Give us a bit of background.
Right. So, Michael Owen Hill, I have been in legal tech, I think it's 18 plus years now, in a variety of roles, from sort of advising relatively small law firms in North America, UK, Australia, New Zealand on sort of growth and development strategies for their practice, to working with practical law, which I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar with. And then most recently, we were talking about titles. Most recently, my title was something global legal workflow. I'm not quite sure what that had to do with product portfolio strategy for Elite, but that was what I was called, so it's fine. But I spent the better part of 2 decades talking to everything from lawyers to tech leaders in the largest law firms in the world to the brand new general counsel that was hired about 4 or 5 years too late, who left private practice on the promise of 40-hour weeks and three-week vacations, and now has a lot to clean up, and kind of everything in between, and also have been part of product in one form or another for several different providers for a long time. So really seeing the impact of innovations in technology on not just the sort of grand strategy for legal organizations, but also on the sort of daily lives of legal professionals. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Fantastic. Right. Welcome everybody. Thanks, Michael. I'm going to stay with you as well for our first kind of dive into a question. And it's what we decided we're not going to do, folks. We're not going to spend the next half an hour parsing what the meaning of AI is. I get into that debate way too often. But when we were talking about this session and AI is in the title, people came up with some really interesting views, particularly on, I think, how you might express what AI is to the average lawyer. Not that any of us work with average lawyers, obviously, and how to articulate that. And all three of you are in the game of trying to make this stuff more accessible and less scary. So, Michael, you said some really interesting stuff, particularly that kind of, this is about knowledge, and there's kind of only two things happening here, and let's not make it scary. So, do you want to just tell us something about how you approach that and make it a little bit more accessible and definable?
And I think it's a good question, even though it has, to your point, been sort of debated and chewed over pretty extensively. It's analogous to what's the role of the internet or what's the role of email, right? I think there's a natural desire to want to distill down at what stage of what particular type of workflow is this technology most relevant. I think that's natural. It has been the case with all or many tech innovations. But like many or all tech innovations, I think the impact will be more broad. I find it more useful in conversation with whether it be practitioners or technology leaders and legal organizations to think about it more in the concept of lawyer workflow. And I understand very, very deeply that different firms' workflows are, of course, the secret sauce, and it's all very, very bespoke. However, if we step back to kind of a useful distance and think about what the work of lawyering is, which isn't that different than my work or any kind of expertise-based knowledge workers' work, we have to find information, right, that is relevant to our task or project. We have to then synthesize and understand that information. We have to apply it to the task at hand. And hopefully we're working in a platform or a system or a set of systems wherein all of that activity generates enrichment, generates data, makes the next cycle more fortuitous, more efficient, more higher quality. So that's I think a fairly simplistic lens. And so I think as we're thinking about this from a user perspective, there are a couple of obvious areas of improvement. One is on the help me find and synthesize that information that's relevant, because one thing none of us work in is a dearth of information. It's about finding the most on point information. And then how can we seamlessly apply that to the task at hand, and specifically those tasks that we would frankly rather be doing something else. That there are tasks or interactions that demand expertise, that demand nuance, that frankly are more energizing and fun and enriching for ourselves. How do we apply the technology to make sure we can do more of what we find is rewarding, and that is rewarding for our clients and stakeholders, and less of the rote work that we kind of feel doesn't require our attention? Another sort of angle to take, because there's a lot of hype. I mean, in talking with a bunch of law firm CTOs in North America and London towards the end of last year, there was a lot of, well, look, like now everyone's saying that it's all about agentic AI, and I'm just getting my head around generative AI, and how are these things different? It's like, okay, well, hold on. Look, generative AI has certain capabilities. They're relatively well, easy to understand. It can take a little bit of content, turn it to a lot of content. It can take content that looks like this and turn it into content like this. It can answer questions about content. That's not an exhaustive list, but how are you exposing that to users? What is the most natural way to interact with that technology? Is it through a chatbot? Sometimes, yes. When you're trying to kind of get your head around a concept or extract useful information out of a bunch of documents, 100%. If you're trying to do something scalable and repeatable where there's a lot of precision in terms of how it needs to be done, that's like an application where you go and you say, I'm trying to do this task. There's an application for that task. It operates a certain way. If it needs to change, I can have someone change it and then it will operate that way consistently, therefore. Or is it the kind of thing where I just expect this to happen every single time I do something? Every time I load a document into wherever, I need something to happen. That's really the distinction between the sort of assistant AI, the generative AI that you would find in an application, hopefully married with traditional rules and logic-based automation, because most of document work is logical, or the kind of agentic. Agentic is just a piece of software that responds to a trigger and acts autonomously to complete a task on your behalf. It's complicated from a developer perspective. It's complicated from a strategy perspective, from a workflow perspective, workflow design perspective, but from a user perspective, it's like, cool, a thing happens and I don't have to worry about it because it will always happen consistently the way it's supposed to. Yay, that's agentic AI. Now,
That's a great cue. That kind of, look, this is really complicated. If you're a developer, if you're working in the tech, if you're a user, it shouldn't be. It should be, hey, this helps me do this. So, and it's a good cue. So, Lucia, I want to bring you in here. You've talked a bit about your role, and you've talked when we've discussed this earlier about your mission, and you want to move the conversation on from the tech to the humans. So, how do you introduce this topic, and how do you start to achieve that? Let's move on from the tech and get into the humans.
Thanks, Chris. That's a great question. So first of all, I would argue that any conversation about AI should not start with AI or its wonders or how revolutionary it is or how it's going to radically redefine what being a lawyer or a professional in law firms or in legal is, all of which I believe to be true. And why we shouldn't start that conversation with AI is because if from a behavioral standpoint, if we want to influence others and make them try and embrace AI, we really need to understand how human brains work when making decisions around technology and when performing actions around technology. We need to understand the science behind their behavior to be better at persuading them or swaying them in others' direction, in the right direction, we would say. So to do this, to persuade people to move towards technology or AI, there are two approaches. One is the standard approach, and the other is the behavioral science approach. The standard approach is, I would like to illustrate this with an example, the 5 a day campaign in the UK, which is this campaign that encouraged people to eat at least 5 portions of fruits or vegetables each day. Of course, this campaign centers around simply telling people that they should eat fruits and vegetables. Now, we all know this campaign, so clearly it has people know about it, so it has raised awareness. However, from a behavioral science research standpoint, this campaign hasn't been very successful because it hasn't translated into sustained, widespread, and lasting dietary behavior change, and that continues to be challenging. And I would say the same logic applies to AI in the legal world. The reason why the standard approach we take in law firms to explain AI or to make people approach AI is highly focused on providing information to people. And when we provide information to people, we are assuming they can assimilate a lot of information at once. They know that what they will increase their happiness and efficiency, and that they will always act to maximize their self-interest. And the traditional approach leads to solutions that we have all tried and tested in the legal world, like throw at people a ton of information, provide billable time credit for people to try the new tools, or even plainly restrict or ban behaviors around AI, or just around technology more generally. And those have been largely ineffective. And that is evidenced by the fact that adoption rates remain largely widespread. So what's the alternative behavioral science approach? Is that the behavioral, and again, to share with you an example, is how often do we see people ignore legal advice or skip court dates or delay critical decisions or smoke, drink, or eat excessively, even when they know these have adverse consequences for them that are clear and that are serious. And the reason why people act this way is because the behavioral science approach challenges the assumption that people will act simply because something is important, is rational, or is right, or is going to change the world of law. And actually, behavioral science considers how people actually make decisions in practice and to meet them where they are. And one important aspect of the behavioral science approach, and I'm going to tell more about this later, is that this approach acknowledges the irrationality and complexity of the human brain and the process we follow to make decisions. And it aims at exploring why motivates our decisions, our behaviors. And after we understand that, we can nudge or move people towards more desirable behaviors. This is something that can apply to any field, but this is especially important in the field of technology and AI.
Brilliant. And yes, absolutely. We're going to get a bit more into that behavioral science piece in a minute. And I love that we're meeting lawyers, people where they are, which is I think a theme you've all got. James, you said something when we were prepping for this about, which I loved, about you were trying to be the friendly face of AI. And because you're dealing with not just one firm either, you multiple firms now growing every day, clearly, different people, different cultures. So give us an idea of how you can be the friendly face of AI, how you're kind of bringing this to people's attention and trying to get them engaged.
Yeah, I'll try. So yeah, as you say, when we talked, it was 5 firms I was trying to juggle, and it's now 6. And I guess just very quickly, part of the deal, if you want to call it that, when you join the law firm group, is that you retain your culture. And your identity. That is very important to this process. So my job is really to support the lawyers, the legal teams in all of those different environments, understand their cultures, understand how they work, understand what their kind of brand is, what they're all proud of, and then help to sort of move them on that journey collaboratively. For me, that friendly face of IT really is about trying to, I guess, first of all, dispel this idea that myself and AI are here to take your jobs or bring about the rise of the robots or activate Skynet or whichever 80s and 90s sci-fi action flick you're thinking of, but really to reassure them that this technology is going to bring about change, but it's change that's going to help you in the long term, and that it's here to augment you and not replace you. And I think that is what I try to encourage. I want to make sure that when I'm engaging the business to look for opportunities for using this technology, that I'm not just doing that magpie thing of going for the shiniest new technology. I naturally gravitate towards that as a tech nerd. It's why I do what I do. And you do get excited about the shiny. You see new capability and you think, this is great, everyone's going to love it. Not everyone is always as enthusiastic about change as I am, or excited to hear about these new products. So it's then working with them and trying to understand actually what are the problems they're trying to solve, what are the real issues that they would like to see dealt with, and how can we use technology and how can we work together to do that. I think also, perhaps for those who are a little bit more enthusiastic, there is also the AI's magic, air quotes, that is often a challenge. I think people will think about a challenge they face today or a problem, and they'll go, right, I've heard about this new thing called AI. AI will solve this. Then you say, brilliant. Okay, what's the process? Tell me how you see AI sort of doing what it's going to do. And they'll talk to you about position A, and they'll talk about where they want to get to with position B, and then they'll just say, an AI will do that bit in the middle. And to Michael's point, it should be that simple for the end user, but it never is in terms of implementing that technology and building those solutions. So trying to help people understand that, as well as the amazing opportunities that AI presents and that technology in general can present, it also has limitations. It can't do absolutely everything. And actually, there may be problems in your organization that can be solved today that don't require AI, that you may already have tools on your desktop, so to speak, that you can just go and grab and start using. So it's for me, it's all about collaboration. It's about trying to clearly let those users know that I'm here to listen, that I want to understand what they're trying to achieve, and then work with them to achieve that I'm not going to go away and do it in a silo. I truly do believe in that kind of collaboration from start to finish when it comes to kind of any technology project.
Brilliant. You reminded me of a quote. Somebody on a panel I was on a few weeks ago said, from a tech company who'd been doing implementations with law firms, and they were asked what the biggest challenge was during their implementations. They said there are two. The first one is everybody expects AI can do everything, and the second one is lots of people expect AI can't do anything. And we've got these two poles, and where are all the people in the middle? And it's really tricky, which kind of again brings us on mindset. And I think that when the session was advertised, it mentioned mindset. Obviously, nobody's mindset is identical, so let's not be generic about all lawyers or stereotypical, but dealing with and changing mindsets and getting people opened up. So Lucia, you that's a lot of your role. You talked about how do you bring behavioral science into the law firm context and achieve some behavioral change, I guess mindset change as well. You got some examples of what you're doing with behavioral science and how you're applying it? That'd be really interesting to hear.
Sure, Chris. Yeah, so it's that question is great, because I think the reason why we're talking about behavioral science in the legal world context is because we can improve our strategies to for more people to adopt AI if we were to let behavioral science inform our communication campaigns or our efforts, instead of following the traditional approach of just throwing information at people. And I would like to comment on two important aspects, or how I am or we are applying behavioral science in the law firm context. And I'm going to be discussing two powerful tools that we have tried and tested. And one is the power of social norms, and the other is the power of incentives. So taking a step back, I mean, human behavior in the end is the function of two things: is the person and the environment. So behavior comes partly from the person, from people themselves, from the motivation people have to do things, or from their ability to do something. Cycling is a good example. For instance, if someone doesn't want to cycle, they won't cycle. So that's the motivation piece. And ability is, if they are not able to cycle because they don't know how to cycle, they won't cycle either. So that's very clear, very natural. But what we often forget when it comes to human behavior is that as humans, we are heavily influenced by the environment in which we are operating. And when it comes to the environment, there are two elements that influence how we behave. One is the social, the context, the people around us, what other people are doing. And in the cycling example, if other people, our colleagues, are cycling to work, then we will be much more likely to adopt cycling than if no one cycles to work. And also the other component is physical environment. We are also heavily influenced by the way our environment is set up. So in the case of cycling, if there's no infrastructure to cycle, then we won't be able to cycle. So when we are trying to think of solutions to influence people embracing AI, we tend to focus a lot on the person itself, and we forget the environment and the power of others. So bringing these concepts into the AI and law firm world, social norms is a powerful strategy that we can adopt to increase AI. And why is that? Because, well, this is to say the obvious. We are social animals. We tend to follow the herd, especially if it's people like us, from whom we identify with or we admire. And this has several consequences. We pay a lot of attention to the way we are perceived by others. We are deeply influenced by what our colleagues do. We are deeply influenced by who conveys the message to us, not just the message itself. And we are we always like to confirm to what is perceived as normal or acceptable in our environment. So try and tested ways to use social norms to enhance AI. For instance, telling people close to them, telling people that others close to them are using AI already, becomes all of a sudden the social norm of the reference point for people. And people will be much more likely, and we have tested this, people will be much more likely to adopt technology if you tell them 9 out of 10 associates in your litigation team, let's say, are already using this X AI tool to do X work. And this, you can adapt the message, right? If you're talking to an associate, you will reference the social norm of associates. If you're talking to a partner, of course, you will reference the partners. But then we need to draw attention to the good behaviors versus the bad behaviors. We always focus, I believe this to be true, but I would love to hear from the audience. We tend to draw attention to the negative behaviors around AI. We complain how little people are adopting AI and blah, blah, blah in the context of law. And what that does is anchoring people to the negative behaviors. So if we draw attention to those who don't embrace AI, then we can be, kind of demotivating people to adopt AI. So we need to highlight the people who are already using AI, even if they are is a very limited group. We should highlight those and highlight what is the desired behavior. And finally, know your target audience is very important. You need to know if people are already using AI. You need to make sure that you tell them that others are using more AI than them, so they make sure that they increase their usage versus decrease the usage. And very quickly, incentives, I mentioned this before. We tend to focus a lot in law firms is that, well, if we throw money, billable time at people, they will try new things and do new things. And money is a good incentive. We all need money. We all like money. We need money. But we need to be thinking when is the right time for to give money to people. And the design of monetary incentives is as important as the money itself. There's a ton of research, and I can share more with that later if we have time, but there's a ton of research that says the moment or the specific opportunity where you give people money to do something is very important to make sure that they adopt the behavior you want them to adopt. And this is the concept of loss aversion that I think we mentioned before. Fear, people have a ton of fear around AI. So if you give people monetary incentives, kind of in a way playing to their fears of loss aversion, of fear of missing out around AI, that could be much more powerful than just throwing money at them without linking the monetary incentive to other, to the loss of not using AI. And there are other incentives that go beyond money. And again, I know we don't have a ton of time, but I would be happy to share other experiments we have done with non-monetary incentives that go a long way to increasing AI adoption.
Brilliant, and I'm sure we'd love you to do that. Whether we'll have time on this one, I don't know. But I love the word experiments as well. Yes. We should all be using that word more. James, experiments in law front, or indeed from your Evershed Sutherland days. How are you trying to overcome resistance or get people more engaged?
Sure. So I'll touch on that human-centered design point that I referenced earlier on, and talk a bit about desirability. I think that's one that I think is often missed when it comes to selection criteria for IT projects or technology projects. And I'll give you the reason why. So often technology projects are selected based on their feasibility and viability. So can we implement this tool? Does it exist? Does our infrastructure accept it? Yep. Okay. So it's feasible. Viability, do we have the budget? Is it within our budget? Do we want to spend that kind of money? Yeah, okay, you've got a business case. And often that problem is then kind of, it's assumed, there's a challenge here, there's some tech's going to solve it. The marketing team at Vendor X have told me that they can triple my productivity with this tool. This is perfect for our legal teams. And then that tool is purchased, it's kind of thrown at those individuals, and for a variety of reasons you probably meet some sort of resistance to that change. often it's through desirability or a lack of desirability. So one of the things that I've always tried to do using some of these sort of design thinking principles and other change theories that Lucia clearly is tapping into some of the amazing stuff she's doing. It's about making sure those users feel brought into that journey and part of that process. So rather than me selecting a tool because I've seen it on the market, their sales team says it's great and, oh, aren't I wonderful? I've brought you this new tool that's going to make you super efficient. I never actually asked you the question, was this a problem for you? Is this an area that you feel you're inefficient? I've assumed you are, and now you're insulted because I think you're inefficient. Actually, what I should try to do is take the time to understand the problems that they've got and then bring them on the journey to identify the solution. So one of the things I always try to do, and I'm hands up, I'm a technologist at heart, I am not a lawyer, therefore I do not understand the intricacies of everyone's legal processes. So I need to work with those experts and not try and do their job for them or select solutions for them. So I think for me, it's very much about that collaborative journey. It's about taking them on the journey of identifying the problem, selecting the solutions, trialing those solutions, and gaining that buy-in. And it's useful for a couple of reasons. One, hopefully you'll have happier users when that technology is ultimately signed off, but also they'll be on the hook to make sure that technology works. Because if they've been heavily involved in the business case and pushing for that investment and helping you get the sign off for however much you've got to spend to bring that new shiny tool in, they're also then as responsible as I am, if not more so, for making sure that product is successful. They can't simply hold their hands up and go, I didn't ask for it. It's not my fault it's not getting used. So I think, it's a little bit carrot and a little bit stick. But that's kind of think where we've seen the most success is when you've truly collaborated and taken those users on the journey with you. So I think that would be kind of my approach to overcoming some of that resistance.
Just picking up on that collaboration point, you in your role before you joined Lawfront around legal design, you spent a lot of time working with the clients and trying to solve solutions. And I certainly heard other people sort of talk about this. Is that one of the levers when you're trying to get people internally engaged? Is the client wants it, or guess what? I'm working with your client and they're telling me, this is what they want, and I'm helping them find. How important is bringing what the clients really want inside the firm?
It's huge, especially if they're important clients to your organization. I mean, ultimately, especially from a law firm perspective, your clients are your lifeblood, aren't they? If they're not bringing the work to you and driving more and more of their panel firm work towards your organization, in the example of Oversheds, then you've got a problem, and you're going to have senior members of your organization to answer to if that client engagement isn't a positive one. I think what was always really interesting is we used to do an activity during a design thinking workshop called the customer journey map. But it's a really simple process. Some of you will probably have done this before. It's like process mapping with emotions, basically, with feeling. So you map out the key stages of an activity or an intervention, and then you try and attribute positive or negative kind of association with each step of that process. How does it feel to do that particular task? And you do that through the lens of the client and or the customer. What's always really interesting to me, and I've done this a number of times during workshops, is how to refocus a team who've started to rank the elements of this process based on how they enjoy that piece of work. Well, I hate that bit because that's when the client sends me like 5 different emails because they never send me all the information all at once, or I have to go back and forth to try and get clarification on some of the finer points of a particular instruction. And that becomes a massive problem, and then a focal point for the team to try and solve. And I'll hold my hands up. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was involved in a project before I knew this of design thinking, and we had taken all of our requirements from an internal team to solve a problem, to create a solution for a client. And we were sort of 9 months into a 12-month project. We'd built this fantastic portal. We got this solution all ready to go. And I had this horrible realization as I just was starting to dip my toe in to design thinking at this point, that all of my requirements had come from the internal team supporting the client. And at no point had I had any kind of access to the client to validate these needs. And I realized as I was growing my understanding of the legal space as well, that this particular client appointed us as one of many panel firms. And what we were about to deliver them, which was this fantastic dynamic instruction portal, which was going to allow them to manage their instructions with the firm, see dashboards, all that good stuff, workflow approvals, all the jazz, was that we had fundamentally redesigned their interaction with one of their panel firms, but had no impact or effect on the others. And actually, by taking away their ability just to pick up the phone or fire off an email to their favorite lawyer at Eversheds, I had routed them through a slightly more frictionful process, if you like, logging into a portal, filling in mandatory fields, submitting this kind of, this detail online. So actually what I had set out to do was to create this much more cohesive, joined up environment. And actually I'd fragmented the end user's experience of how they instructed their law firms. And I will say there's a happy ending. I can't really like the portal. And from what I gather, it was all okay. But that realization was quite a scary one. And it's something that stuck with me ever since, is is to make sure that you understand who you're designing for. And in most instances at Eversheds, in that role, it was clients. So, the lawyers, to a degree, needed to get on board with what was good for the client. My world's a little different now. I am, at the moment at least, looking at designing solutions to help make our lawyers' lives better. But I do hope that in time, I'll also be doing the same thing for our clients, as we are very kind of ambitious in that space as well.
Yeah, great story. Thank you for that. Michael, I'm going to come to you. And I know you've talked, one of the things you've said is lawyers shouldn't be scared of this stuff. They shouldn't be afraid of IT and software. And so I'm interested in techniques you've seen or deployed for making that happen, to making people more reassured.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, some of the things that have been mentioned already. I mean, there's the approach, obviously, and a more kind of collaborative engagement, making sure that the technology team or the innovation team or whoever is making the decisions and designing the solutions is bringing, as we would say, bringing the end user along for the ride. Simply because that's bad product development practice, right? You never design products without being very centered in the user and the user experience. I think there is also an element of, I do believe that some of the fear or reluctance, as distinct from the general kind of change reluctance, or you'll find people who are I wouldn't say Luddite, but perhaps just less excited about technology, less more skeptical of technology in general. But if we really hone in on AI in particular, I really do believe that a lot of it has to do with the confusion and, in some ways, outright sort of mysticism in terms of how it's talked about. Right. I mean, so I think as change agents or as leaders, I think it's worthwhile to make sure that we understand what's going on and make sure that we understand it in a way that we can convey it such that it's not mystical and magical. One, because I think that produces some of that fear, but also because I think it sets unreasonable expectations. It's just technology. It does some really cool things very well. There are things that it doesn't do particularly well. It's part of solutions. You very rarely the only solution. All the things that have been said before. But I do think that there's a almost like a flip of a switch that can occur when someone has an experience. Let's say a GC Friday evening gets 50 documents that have to be reviewed, high urgency from the CEO, and everyone else has gone home. And it's like, oh God, I wish I had my team here. And like the ability to actually use a tool to help them, that kind of emotional gratification of like, oh, my problem is solved. You can very quickly become, oh, AI for everything. It's like, well, okay, but how did you use it? And was that an assistant? Was that something scalable? Do you need that to happen 1,000 times a year exactly the same way? Like coming in as partners with our practitioners to take on that burden of the strategy and the technical complexity while still being very open to understand those evolving needs. Because as soon as we drop a new set of solutions into the ecosystem, things are going to change. Patterns are going to change. And I think the other element I would bring in is workflow design as a discipline. It can be supported by like people who really do that very well. On the flip side of this question is one of the things I've seen that doesn't necessarily work well is to spend 6 months trying to detail out exactly how an existing process works and then finding a way to replicate that with technology, because probably that process isn't optimal from across a number of ways because it's developed organically. So I highly encourage and have seen a lot of success from firms who have brought in like hired on business process analysts, people who really understand business process management, and can do that process of discovery and process design so that I don't feel like I'm using AI. I don't feel like I'm using the system. I just feel like, wow, it used to be such a slog to do this type of work. And now I have more cognitive availability. I have more energy. My experience is better, and I can really focus on the things that I want to focus on.
I love that. A couple of points there, particularly. I mean, that little plea there for bring in some specialists. There are people with great skills out there. I think that I saw quite a bit of nodding from the other panel members. I'm sure from people listening in as well. It's such a key message. I think this isn't these people can help us in doing these changes. And I loved your Friday night example, the GC, because that whole bit about time, the temporal element of this, and that there are points where this is just going to be such a massive game changer to people, and maybe those are the points. It's late, it's weekend, it's you've got way too much on. It's Friday night. I think that's really, really powerful. Thanks for those. I'm gonna drill in now to some real specifics and a bit quick fire. Also, everybody listening, if you do want to ask any questions, pop them in the Q&A. We won't have time for many, but we'll try and do some fast track ones at the end if you've got some questions. So James, just one thing I want to drill down into that you mentioned when we were talking last week was you've got an AI and innovation champions group set up, and I'm just interested about that. Just how does that work? How did you set it up? Who's involved?
Yeah, sure. So I try and be quick. So it's basically a cross-business, cross-practice, cross-hub firm within Lawfront, group of individuals that have been nominated themselves or voluntold. I think someone told me was another term in some instances, that have been put forward because they are people that are evangelists for technology, SMEs in their given area of law, and enthusiastic about bringing about change. So we've looked for kind of people that make typically good agents of change, to Michael's point. And these individuals then come together once a month at the moment, out of respect for their diaries and their time, to talk about the different challenges that we have across the firm and how we might solve them with technology. And I'm currently using that forum as a showcase to try and raise awareness and raise the knowledge of this audience around what is available on the market. So for many of these organizations, prior to kind of Lawfront acquisition, they may have been limited in terms of what they could spend or would spend, in terms of niche or bespoke legal tech tools or some of the bigger products that we perhaps associate with the bigger firms in the market. And what we're trying to now help them understand is that there's more opportunity. We can bring more to them as part of this bigger firm. We've got more buying power. We've got more aspirations to kind of bring in innovative technology. So I'm using it very much as a showcase for vendors to come along, introduce their products. We try and select things that have broad appeal, simply because of the nature of that group. They cover all aspects of law and all areas of our business, but to show them what can be done with technology in the hope that it will spark that creativity. It'll have them think about that one process that they hate doing on a Friday night, to Michael's point, that keeps them from their families, that keeps them from their hobbies, and then to bring those ideas to me, rather than me going out and saying, you need this tool, you must have this technology. It's about trying to educate them, raise the level of knowledge and understanding of this market, so that they can start to identify the tools that they think will best solve their problems. And hopefully, just to finish off, by having this kind of cross-firm group and cross-practice group, we can find business cases and put them together much more easily, because we can bring together different people from different practices at once, rather than having to identify a tool through one practice and then try and find other people that might be interested. If we can do it all in one place at once, which makes it more dynamic as well.
Yeah, that's really good. How many people have you got on that group at the moment?
At the moment, it's around 35. We'll obviously be looking to expand that in the next month or two, once our new acquisition is on board as well.
Yeah, and I guess, and I'm going to come to Lucia now, but that's those people are then playing some part in changing social norms. They're now kind of hopefully radiating some of that around the firms. Lucia, you talked about experiments and projects that you're running. How do you get people to contribute to those? How and who are you trying to bring in? Sort of, who are you looking for to get influence?
Yeah, I would like to highlight two aspects of this. One is this concept of meet lawyers where they are. And I think as leaders of innovation in our organizations, we cannot expect people to move towards technology all the time. I think it's our responsibility to move technology to people in a way. And the way we can do that is precisely what you just mentioned. Among other strategies that we have used is the power of the rest. And just like James, we have a group of innovation ambassadors that is a group that is representative of all practice groups, all business support teams, at all levels, from the most junior members of the organization to the most senior members of the firm. It's a bigger group because we have been building this over the years, 5 years. So it's right now we have 400 people across the globe. And we as leaders of innovation and technology are not the ones conveying the messages about technology and the importance of trying and testing. Is we have these spokespeople and we have these ambassadors at every level in the organization, conveying to others what the expectations are and what are the prevalent behaviors. And another aspect that I would think has worked really well for us is make lawyers especially co-design and build AI tools, or be part of the process where we onboard AI tools. This is a cognitive bias that is called the IKEA effect, where we place much higher value on things we have partially created ourselves. So instead of just exposing people to something, we make them part of the discussion. And we have a super important project right now. We've been working for the past 6 months. And I can truly say that the lawyers are the co-designers together with AI experts. And I cannot emphasize how important that has been for communicating the importance of lawyers using AI, and also to scale the solution from the original team to other teams across the organization.
Brilliant. That's I like the IKEA effect. It's good to have labels on these things sometimes.
Exactly.
We kind of all think, yeah, we know that's true. That's great. Michael, I'm coming to you now. One of the things you said, and you said earlier on, I've done a lot of talking to a lot of CIOs and other people in UK and US law firms, and something you've talked about is there are firms you see who are really making some progress with this. That might be, achieving growth or profitability or other performance aims. Any specifics you see that are worth bringing to people's attention that you think this is working really well?
Yes, and I think it highlights that working well is highly dependent upon the goals and challenges of the individual organization. And honestly, the connective tissue is a degree of sort of strategic thinking, interconnected, kind of fully aligned strategic thinking when it comes to the leadership of the organization and those that are tasked with the technology strategy. So kind of on the large end of the spectrum, there's a firm that I've worked quite a bit with for the International Legal Technology Association, ILTA. They're a great proponent, but they went from basically, the kind of place where many firms are sort of investigating and, oh, well, there's so many tools and figuring it out, to really having something close to 200 AI-enabled applications rolled out to lawyers, and have already transitioned into like really measurement and refinement, because they bring our job is to build and release products that help solve individual and firm problems that are like fully connected into what the firm's objective is. The specific example there is they had a corporate client that wanted them to handle their collections practice. They weren't really willing to give that at a fixed rate or an AFA. So it was relatively small, and they didn't want to hire a bunch of people to process it. What is unique about that firm, or I should say uncommon about that firm, again, that business centricity of, let's think about this through the lens of how we can apply technology to not only better satisfy that particular client, but open up a whole new revenue stream for the firm, achieve a multiple on our hourly, while being able to offer the AFA that will attract more business without having to become different. without having to hire a bunch of people to do a thing that no one really wants to do. Like that is a like really business strategic lens. On the other end of the spectrum, a immigration firm, kind of complicated process around visas for extraordinary talent. They typically outsourced it. It was quite costly and took a long time. They were able to leverage a blend of traditional and AI-powered automation to really shorten that process and shorten the cost to the firm. But they were really thoughtful about, well, what about the junior associate? Like, what's the value of doing this and really understanding how this process works and working it manually so that we aren't enabling people without educating them. So I think like very different use cases, very different scenarios, different types of organizations, but the level of thoughtfulness about the impact to the broader business, the impact to the client, the opportunity, as well as the impact to the individual, and making sure that we're raising up good lawyers and we're not enabling them to the extent that it may impair them later. I think those are the kinds of conversations that I see the successful examples engaging in. And on the flip side, the sort of like, well, but what use case can we apply it to this document or this workflow? I think that trap that sometimes we get into, the kind of the forest, the trees, not the forest conversation, can actually impair the higher level strategic conversation. I really do believe that legal organizations and frankly all organizations should be engaged in now around AI.
Fantastic. Yeah, align everything to your understand your strategy first. What are we trying to achieve? What kind of firm are we? And then align everything, very much including all of these tools to that. It makes sense. I also love that you've twice in your responses, you've included this reference to individuals or whole firms, the things they don't want to do. And I think it's such an important driver. You know, there's loads of things that people are doing they don't want to do, or they've got used to doing that they shouldn't really be doing. And that's a great driver. Really, really interesting point. We really are coming to the end of the session. I did ask everybody. I don't think we've got any questions for me to fire at you at the moment. Some nice feedback, which is good. So I did ask you all, and Michael's kind of given some examples there, but maybe Lucia and then James very quickly. Anything really specific, a particular tip, project, feature of maybe some AI that you've come across while you're doing your work that you think, I really just want to mention this? Lucia, anything from you?
I'd like to highlight this project that we're working on with the lawyers, and it's actually it's something that is very new, and instead of just asking the lawyers to adapt to a preset set of technology, we are building something around them. And I think I would like to highlight, because that's to James' excellent point about the importance of design thinking and just building products and services around our internal clients as well, which are lawyers. I think I would like to highlight the importance of bringing people on board, ask them to roll their sleeves and work with us, and to give people recognition for that. Beyond financial incentives, I think we should be much better in legal to recognize people's efforts, and also to give them praise for being so forward-looking and being the propellers of change in our organizations. That's a massive achievement in law.
Thank you for that. James, you've got almost the last word.
Oh God, how scary. So I'm going to say something that doesn't feel as innovative, but one of the things that's really gained traction for us has been encouraging everyone to dip their toe into generative AI in a safe way. So we, and many people on the call will have similar available to them in their organization, is looking at Copilot Chat, specifically the enterprise secure version that Microsoft provides to, I think, most of its Microsoft business customers now. It's a safe space that if you're comfortable, your company is comfortable, you can put sensitive data, client data, things that you would never put into the public tools. And it's been amazing running workshops with some of the teams to see how excited people get over what were, and to Michael's point, doing the task that no one wants to do. Simple task like taking a meeting transcript and very quickly turning it into a formatted set of meeting notes that you can then file or provide to your client or whatever seeing the speed at which those things can be produced, the sort of shock and awe and the delight that it causes, I think perhaps you forget, especially if you are in the technology sphere, that you've been around this now for several years. That's perhaps not as exciting to you because you've been monitoring these movements since, you know, ChatGPT burst onto the scene in 2022. But to people that haven't really engaged with this, that aren't tuned into it, that don't know what's going on, that sort of stuff is mind-blowing. And, you know, it's a little bit scary, but it's also exciting because it gives them, there's a tease of some time back. Maybe I'll get to log off on time tonight. Maybe I'll get a lunch break. You know, so sometimes it's those small, simple things that will win people over. And I think with a tool like Copilot Chat, you've probably all got access to it in some way. You can start to lay those foundations. And then when people are getting comfortable with that, then stretch them, you know, go for the next, go something a little bit more advanced, go for the legal workflow or whatever it might be, but get them comfortable with the basics and get them experimenting and exploring these tools that are readily available now and offer both work and personal benefit. We've encouraged people to dip in and plan their next holiday, you know, do that kind of research, because if you can't see a work application, maybe you'll be able to write a poem or a bedtime story for your little one. Just little things like that. Just finding that hook, isn't it? Everyone's got that the thing that's going to get them on board, something that sort of tickles the emotion, so to speak, rather than perhaps is super practical and super organized.
Yeah, that's got great final points there, James. Look, thank you, James. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Michael, who got up really early this morning to join us. So special kudos there. That was a fantastic panel. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot. Hope you all did too. Thanks for joining us. It's been a Legal Tech Talks produced by Net Law Media, and thank you, Net Documents, for their support for this as well. Do subscribe today and join us for future discussions.